It's like I thought the whole point of a marathon is like I want to look as much like a vegan as possible. I want to wither away into nothing so I look like the tree that's on fire at the end of the Lord of the Rings.
Warning! You're watching Dr. Todd Lee TV, where theoretically you could learn a bunch of cool shit.
This is going to be a new series called the Shit to Avoid series. And we're going to start this off with Boldenone. Does Boldenone have a place? Sometimes. Does a Boldenone have a place in your butt cheek? Probably not. So, Boldenone is a compound. It's a testosterone-based compound. It's considered an anabolic steroid. It's a steroid means a cholesterol-based hormone. It's very similar to testosterone, except that there is a double bond at carbon 1. That this is basically injectable version of D-bol, although it works completely different from D-bol. I won't discuss D-bol any further. That Boldenone does not convert into DHT, it converts into DHB. DHB is supposed to be very toxic if you inject it directly. Some people believe that it's twice as potent as normal testosterone. Maybe. Who knows? Boldenone is normally called Equipoise because it's made for horses. It has some unique features that make it above other anabolic steroids in a good way, that it increases red blood cells like a motherfucker. This is good for horses that race. This is bad for humans. We don't need to have more red blood cells that could basically result in stroke, according to doctors. Watch the phlebotomy video for that. I'm not entirely convinced that's true. Most of the time, the reason why your red blood cell content or your hemoglobin or hematocrit are high is because you're dehydrated. I used to go in there with 30 ounces of water, get my blood drawn, and I would come back with between a 50 and a 55 hematocrit. Now, when I drink a gallon before every time I get my blood drawn, it comes out as 48 on the dot every time. So most of you that are getting phlebotomized, it's because your doctor sucks. He doesn't know what he's doing. And I'm not going to get into this any further, but if you were simply hydrated, you'd be below the 50 mark. EQ might get around that. It might legitimately drive your red blood cells up too high. Hematocrit and hemoglobin specifically more than red blood cells. Now, the other thing it does is it strengthens tendons. It increases collagen synthesis, I believe, at 200 or 300 milligrams a day by 340%. Now, that's a super low dose of EQ. Many people might include the EQ if they're on a big cycle just for joint health instead of including DECA for joint health. Because DECA, unlike EQ, they're not the same. Llewellyn was wrong that they're structurally completely different. DECA is a nandrolone. It also has a long onset time because it's got a DECA is decanoate. It means it's a 10 carbon ring attached to carbon 17. Whereas with Boldenone, it has a much longer one. I think it's undecanoate or something like that. But anyway, it takes 72 days for regular EQ to hit steady state concentration. So some people, like myself, would just do a loading dose and then run it double dose for 3 days, then back it down to half of that. So, for instance, if I wanted to if I wanted to use 800 milligrams, it would take 72 days for me to hit 800 milligrams, meaning that if I probably did 1600 milligrams for a week and then back down to 800 milligrams, it would probably be the same thing. I'd have to check on the steroidplotter.com and see exactly at what point what is the actual level in the blood that the steady state concentration is hit with 800 milligrams. Then I'd have to look on a graph of 1600 milligrams, how many days it took to hit that level. Then we'll basically, once I use the 1600 milligrams for that amount of days, switch to the 800 and I'd be able to run it there. This obviates the need for Boldenone cypionate. Boldenone cypionate has the 7 carbon chain or the 8 carbon chain. I think anathate is 7 carbon. I think cypionate is 8 or 9 carbon chain attached to carbon 17. And that will have a shorter half-life, so it's a quicker onset time. The problem with Boldenone cypionate, from what I understand, is it's very painful. side injection. Now, a lot of you are like, well, you're shooting yourself with the needle and you don't like it, pussy. Fuck you. All right. So if the purpose is to step on stage and win a bodybuilding show, you don't want inflammation in your muscles, because inflammation causes scar tissue, and scar tissue makes your muscles look ugly. So the point of using steroids is not to have ugly looking muscles on stage. Now, if you have a different motivation, you probably wouldn't be using Boldenone. It has no powerlifting application, really. It might have an endurance application, like if you're going to do a marathon or some shit, but I don't know how much glory is there with a marathon. And I was like, I'm going to take steroids so I can win a marathon. It's like, what? It's like, I thought the whole point of a marathon is like, I want to look as much like a vegan as possible. I want to wither away into nothing, so I look like the tree that's on fire at the end of the Lord of the Rings at Two Towers, running away from Isengard as it fell. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Fusion Regenerative Therapies, where I am the Director of Human Performance. This is the practice in which I practice medicine. We will be able to order you blood work and read your blood work and help you with therapy as needed based upon the results of your blood work. Please click the link to get a consult with me, and I can help you optimize your performance. Thank you. So I thought that was the point of it. It's like, let's do a bunch of meth and shoot a bunch of nootropics and take a whole bunch of L-carnitine and take EQ and Anadrol and then go run in a marathon. It's like, what? I'll be the most endurance-y dude ever. It's like, I'll lose all the weight. I'll be like 50 pounds. I'll be able to fly. I'll run so fast. We'll like attach wings to your shoes and call you Mercury. We'll even put like puddles of piss for you to run across of, so you can look like you're just splashing across water like Peter Pan. Anyway, sorry. I don't know if you can tell that I have very little respect for runners. And a lot of people are like, why don't you like runners? It's like, because their legs are the size of my wrist. I don't know, man. It's like, that's what girls say all the time. It's like, oh my God, I want to fuck the shit out of him. Look at how tiny his body is. Like, I don't think I've ever heard a girl say that, but what do I know? It's like, so anyway, enough about runners. So they give it to horses because horses win races because they're runners. And you know what's funny? When I was a little kid, my mom would say to me, "Is like, do you know what they do with horses that lose?" And I was like, "What, Mom?" She would say, "They make glue." So that would be like what my pop talk would be before sports. Is like, and it scarred me like a motherfucker. She would deny saying it though because.
Warning!
Back to the topic at hand of Boldenone. Hopefully that this stays in the Rumble cut and the Spotify cut, because them some free speech platforms. Woo! It's like we should go to Texas. So back to, I think that Boldenone is just not a great choice. And then the main reason I don't like it is, remember how I told you how it converts into not DHT, it converts in DHB? That'd be great for people who want to keep their hair. However, it actually can act as an AI. And as we know, wiping out estrogen then results in hair loss. So the one good thing about this shit drug is that it's, other than it increases collagen synthesis, that's a good thing. But making your blood super thick, no bueno, unless you're a horse and you're gonna run a race like a horse, or it doesn't convert to DHT, would be great if you don't want to lose your hair, except that it wipes out estrogen, which is going to make you lose your hair. So a very standard thing for pros to do is run 1,000 test and 800 EQ, and that'll help control their estrogen and it'll keep their DHT at a reasonable level, but give them an anabolic load much higher. So that's where it has its place. Although Primo does not convert into DHT. Primo is, in most people, not a strong AI, and it doesn't take forever to peak, although it is also very painful. So comparing Primo to EQ is kind of unfair. You really would want to compare Primo to Boldenone Cypionate or DHB, and that would be a better comparison. And that pretty much sums it up. Like, supposedly DHB is super, super toxic. You know, Primo is relatively liver toxic because of the methylation and carbon 1, but why DHB would be, I'm not sure. Although in DHB, there's a double bond at carbon 1 that might be part of the reason. You know, as most of you know, I think the safest, cleanest drug to run as a second line agent is Masteron because it has none of these side effects. It's not going to drive up your red blood cells. It's not going to hurt your liver. It's not going to cause any more hair loss than Primo or EQ would. It doesn't act as an AI. It might work as a SERM on the estrogen beta receptor in an agonist capacity. So it might actually do the good stuff that estrogen would do, but not the bad stuff, which would make it the perfect anabolic steroid. Although people believe that Masteron is a weak anabolic steroid, that's new. That 10 years ago, people referred to Primo as weak, and they referred to EQ as weak, and they referred to Masteron as something could be strong, but no one's ever used it in an off season. And no one still has ever used it in the off season except for John Jewett, and we've seen him put on 30 pounds of muscle in the last 2 years. So clearly it doesn't work. That's what the conclusion would be based off of people who have stock in the Primo game or the EQ game. Remember, there's safety in numbers, and the sheep that stays with the flock gets to keep its wool and doesn't become lamb chops. So therefore, they are going to stick to their EQ and they're going to stick to their Primo until enough people switch to Masteron. So by being the black sheep and advocating for Masteron in the offseason, I'm either right or I'm wrong. But if I'm right, then I'm going to be way ahead of the pack because eventually everyone's going to be doing what I'm doing. All right. That being said, if you make questions or comments in the comment section, it'll probably get the comments turned off. But if you are on a different platform than YouTube, I'm sure the comments will be there. So choose your platform wisely. Red, green, or green. I forgot to hit off. Oh, and if you want help with your cycle, make sure to click the link in the description box and set up a consult with me. I will help you achieve your goals the healthiest way possible with no judgment and like Planet Fitness that sucks less. May the force be with you.
You're watching Dr. Todd Lee TV, where theoretically you could learn a bunch of cool shit.